Each month is becoming more successful than the last. We're way ahead of our financial predictions. I arrived in school with some school bags in a Tesco shopping bag. We're shutting you down. You haven't paid your taxes. You have to be ignorant. You have to be ballsy, and you have to be naive, and you have to be stupid and just roll with the punches and throw yourself in. Something like that's probably worth like 200 grand.
$200,000.
When we set up the business, then we realised no, they weren't worth that much.
Okay.
That's where reality sets in, and that's where that oh fuck moment happens. Might not be the coolest thing to say on your Tinder date. I was in a maid's room, what a prisoner in the US would call 2x4. Every single project always had the impossible element. Fucking back yourself. If you're gonna do it, just do it. You'll be surprised how many people will back you on your journey, but you do need to be careful not to give too much of your equity away. Other friends of mine who've gone through very similar journeys have had their businesses almost stripped from them. Say, yes, we can do it, and figure it out afterwards.
Hello everyone, I'm sitting here with the amazing and incredible Max Reynard, the founder of the Sauna and Plunge company, but there's so much more to you than that, which is exciting to explore throughout these next few hours or so. But the Sauna and Plunge company, I'm going to leave you to introduce that, because even though it does what it says on the tin, you're the man behind the business.
Yeah, thank you very much. To just lightly introduce myself, Max Reynard, founder of Sauna and Plunge. The Sauna and Plunge, the company is essentially designed to be a wellness hub in London, of which there are many sort of spas and things like that, but I'd define it more as a functional wellness hub, which really focuses on, it really draws from Scandinavian roots and the culture of heat application and extreme cold application. We also have a lovely studio which focuses on breath work and light yoga, and sort of movement focused classes to sort of bridge the gap of wellness. And so it's pretty straightforward with with what it says on the tin, essentially. And we have 2 large saunas, 6 plunge pools, varying in degrees, from 10 degrees, 8 degrees and 6 degrees. We've infused the space with a bit of technology and innovation with 3D printing, which is really draws upon my background as my previous role in my previous company, which I'm sure we'll touch upon later. And there's a lot of inspiration from that. Our plunge pools are all 3D printed, so one large sort of 3D printed organic beautiful shape. We have all this amazing 3D printed partition work and architectural design features throughout the space. The concept is essentially, there's spas in London, but they're not the most accessible. They're always fully booked, quite expensive to go, and it's quite a traditional approach. Whereas what I feel a lot of people need these days is more of a subscription service to wellness, where they can just pass through on their way home from work or to work, or a quick drop in at lunch, or a quick weekend hangover cure, pop in for half an hour, sweat it all out in the sauna, cleanse their palate, refresh their mind, remove those stresses from work, from the depths of their head and their thoughts, clear it all up in a 5 or 10 minute exposure in a 6 degree plunge pool, and then head straight out and be on their way, and rinse and repeat that several times a week. So I think, which essentially is something that the Scandinavians, to use a specific region, it's, of course, also quite common in Japan and Russia and lots of other areas, but ours is particularly infused with the Scandinavian inspiration, and that's also drawn upon my background, my girlfriend, and some of my experiences recently. But yeah, I mean, the idea was there is not enough of this in London, and in lots of sort of urban centres across Europe, and we're here to change that.
That's awesome. And your first site is in Shoreditch, East London.
Yeah.
And we know we've just been talking about your second site already, which you only opened up a few months ago, right?
Yes, exactly. So we wanted to, upon setting up our first site, we marketed our product earlier on as we were gearing up to open up. So we got a lot of interest, a lot of founding members, a lot of support, which I'm hugely thankful for, and thank all of our founding members for signing up before they'd even seen what was actually going to happen there. So putting a lot of faith into us. And then upon launching, we've just had, just grown from success to success, just a continuation of signing up really enthused members, lots of people dropping in and pay-as-you-go customers, and just everyone just loving the space and loving the vibes, loving the music, loving the environment, and leaving, most importantly, feeling totally cleansed mentally and physically. So yeah, we're drawing from each month is becoming successful, more successful than the last. We're way ahead of our financial predictions that we set out, which were punchy but also conservative at the same time. As a sort of weathered businessman and entrepreneur, I know the sort of balance between making too ballsier predictions on a financial model, and we just think, it's going well. We've got this feeling, this is what the city needs. Let's strike whilst the iron's hot. Let's move on to our second location. We're talking about that one specific location, potentially here in West Hampstead, or potentially other locations that we're looking at as well. There's one that came up, but I'm also looking further west as well, Chelsea, Battersea, other places like that.
Sense.
So we're really eager to get started.
That's amazing. Well, we're also eager to get started to learn more about the man behind the business. And it's not just you, right? There's loads of people that sit behind you, the team, the inspiration, the background, and of course where it all started. I know you were born in the UK, but you were brought up in southern Spain, which sounds amazing. I mean, talk to me about that experience.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like, it really interesting upbringing. Moved over to Spain when I was like 6 years old.
Yeah.
And essentially, I went through my entire education process through there up until 18 years old. I went to an English international school, so that's how I retained my Englishness, I suppose. And, I grew up with people from all over the world, all just chucked into this region of Spain by their parents, because their parents were either retiring there or starting businesses there. I think one interesting thing about being an expat kid is that if you go to kind of an international school, then most likely what's going to happen is there's a lot of expat parents there. And if you're an expat parent, then you're probably doing quite an impressive or interesting role abroad, or you're starting a business abroad, or you're up to something interesting. And that's one thing that kind of resonates with a lot of students there. Like, so many parents were just doing this and that, when you do the parents come to school day, like a show and tell day for parents' careers and all that. Like, I don't think we ever had one, but if we did, it would have been fucking wild.
Absolutely.
And especially in the southern coast of Spain, there's all sorts of shit going on there. So, but yeah, so you get this real sense of intercultural understanding, and also this kind of, I don't know, there's just this culture throughout the children that's kind of dispensed from their parents of you know, go figure some of this out, be independent. Here's some cash, you know, figure out what to do with it. There was little startups, you know, in school, like people doing little things, you know, with their pocket money instead of just going out and spending it. I remember what me and my business partner did back in the day was I got these cereal bars from the UK, which you couldn't get in Spain. So every time I'd go to the UK, I'd buy some of these little bars. You know what kids, 6, 7, 8-year-old kids, they're interested in the stupidest things. At one point there was, well, not stupidest, but just more obscure things than you would as an adult.
Yeah.
Also like Pokemon cards, things like that. But I was always running I guess you'd say an import-export business, right? You know, finding things that weren't really available. And then every break time and lunch time, I would use our little classroom. The teacher was gone. And there's a little window that had a little ledge and a little window that opened up onto the playground. And I'd sit there. I'd lay out all my cereal bars or my Pokemon cards or whatever that you couldn't get sold in the specific shops that were around in southern Spain. You had to go further afield to get them. And then, you know, I'd wait for all the kids to form an orderly line. It's £5 for that, five pesetas for that one, or whatever it was. And, you know, back then it was pesetas, then it was euros and things. But it kind of, I don't know, it just kind of started at such a young age, that sort of streak of like figuring it out.
Yeah, entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
But did the school, I mean, they probably wouldn't have sort of encouraged an undercover Pokemon card.
No, there was a lot of shutdowns.
Yeah, but did they running from the teacher?
We're shutting you down. You haven't paid your taxes.
But did you ever feel that the school was encouraging entrepreneurship and trying to expand your horizons and ideas?
Exactly, and I think there was a lot of that, and there are certain segments of when you're growing up that are really important to learning, to understanding life skills. And I don't think there's enough of that in school. So accounting, developing maybe business ideas or ideation or whatever it may be, or really also, like I'm dyslexic. I really struggle with comprehension, with reading, numbers. I'm a mess. When we're doing a maths class in school on site, right? Today, kids, we're doing algebra. You know, y equals mc squared. That's just the way it is. So here we go. This is what you do. And throughout my entire fucking secondary class, schooling, I did maths, I did certain sciences, I did English, and I had no fucking clue what it was for. Why. No one stopped to tell me what the application was and where it would help me and where this was related to in life when you get there. That's just something I think schools lack. But
I completely agree. I think it's one of those things where I was very privileged when I grew up. I went to a very good school, and they did try to encourage sort of entrepreneurship through schemes like the Young Enterprise Scheme, where like a parent would come in and who's run a business or knows quite a bit about business and would mentor students to create this business idea that they've got and nudge them along, which I think was really good. But that came in I think it was 16, 17 years old. And I've tried to help and give back a little bit. We're a little bit younger, like 12, 13, 14 years old, but it's creeping into the curriculum. But I do still feel there's a really strict formulaic approach to education, which is do your GCSEs, do your A-levels, or go to college, do your A-levels, then go to university, get a nice degree, and then you'll get a nice job, graduate scheme job, and then you go on and take on the world. And I've always adhered to that. You know, I took that step. I tried to study well, and I'm fortunate to be a little bit academic, so get decent grades, and my parents be on my back, and do this, become a doctor, become an engineer, or Asian background, obviously. but you're just really pushed to doing those exams, and then suddenly you come out of university and you realise that like the world is way more complex than just get a job, and
following your passion becomes very difficult.
Oh, and it becomes sort of, well, not part of the equation. What is that's something you do over here.
Yeah.
You've got to be serious now. You've got to earn some money. You've got to contribute to the family, or you've got to build up your own sort of little empire. And when you start to realize that actually the world is way different, and businesses are set up for different reasons, and people have different motivations doing whatever, suddenly going to become an accountant or a lawyer or engineer is something that is a wish of someone else. It's not necessarily what you want to do.
Yeah.
And creating that sort of spirit of finding ways to make money, finding ways to create a vision and build a platform and hire people and do something with maybe your mates, as you did with Dominic on Generation 3D, which we'll touch on, is actually quite exciting, quite fun, and it doesn't have to be sort of that formulaic approach to life.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think I understand why people do it. It's the when you're young, you lack a little bit of discipline. You kind of, especially boys, want to run around and do whatever.
You certainly need structure, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really important. It's in the military, why do you keep a good room? Why do you iron all your sheets? It's not because the soldier needs to know how to iron his sheets and his uniform and keep a tidy space. It's to instill discipline. So that formulaic approach, I still think is absolutely necessary, but there's no reason it can't be infused with further understanding, kind of meeting a range of students, because let's face it, you go to a school, you're going to have such a broad range of students intellectually and culturally, and also I don't know, what would you say, from financially, from different backgrounds, right? Wealth gap, essentially. And you kind of need to find a way to meet them in the middle.
I know your father's a professor, right? And he's obviously clearly very academic, very accomplished engineer. And that balanced with you feeling that you were a little bit behind at school and the dyslexia, and maybe your brother felt similar as well. But did you ever feel that because your father was so well accomplished in academics as well, that you had to try and chase that? Or did you feel that you had room for your own path, or did that come a bit later in life?
I think I was fortunate enough, whilst my dad was, very methodical and engineering, robotic, in many regards, in the nicest possible way. He was an entrepreneur himself. He built a very successful business. So he respected that approach to setting up a business in any kind of way, whether it's methodical, whether it's scatty, whether it's... Because he's also friends with a lot of other entrepreneurs who have so many different ways of setting up businesses. So he's met the full spectrum of individual. And he was understanding enough and had enough foresight to allow us to grow into whatever talent or role or interest, and the patience to nurture that for us, So he never pressured us into being better or not good enough or this or that. It was always, it's okay, we'll find what you're good at, focus on that. And he would tease us along with, hey, why don't we try this? Why don't we do a bit of go-karting? He was a race car driver. He won races until the point where in the lower formulas where he built his own car. Wow. And he won races with them in Formula Ford and some of the lower formulas. And it got to the point where he had to stop racing because people, his competitors, were saying, fuck me, where'd you get that car from? And he was like, well, I built it myself. And they were like, right, stop, can you build me one? Because I need to beat you and I need to beat them. So he'd race and he'd build, and he would race and he'd build. And the more he raced, the more he had to build. And eventually it was like, right, well, let's build. And he built his company based on selling racing cars. Long story short, we never had a great deal of pressure put onto us.
Despite his achievements in the academic world and entrepreneurial world, a lot of parents kind of push onto their kids like what they've achieved, and then go like, follow this path because I did it and I'm amazing, so you must be.
You have to be.
Yes. It's written, and you're my genes.
Yes, exactly.
But he gave you that space, that breathing space to kind of be you a little bit, and trusted you in a real strong way to say, right, well, okay, this is one path and I did it and it did well, but you do your path, and I'll give you that space, but I'll help you out with maybe a bit of the thinking, the mindset, maybe some connections or networking or whatever,
Exactly, yeah.
to give you that leg up. That's really, really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I think 5 children will do that to you.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
it'll make you realize that you can't make all 5 children early on successful engineers. You have to allow them to, diversify and take on their own paths and their own roles as human beings, and you have to nurture whichever direction they go in. And that's one thing that also, not credit to him solo, also probably even more so my mum being an absolute cornerstone in that, because it will be my mum who was like, don't fucking push them into that direction, don't pressure them and all that. So I think my mum was keeping tabs on my dad, who was very receptive to her ideas. So
Brilliant.
Certainly a group approach
That's awesome.
to parenting.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were fortunate enough to have that sort of steady upbringing, and parents who looked after our interests properly.
Because I think a lot of some things I'm really passionate about, but also things we're trying to do with our wider platforms on social media is to educate people a little bit on the financial world, a little bit on entrepreneurial world, and of course this podcast is to show relatable people like yourself who can talk about entrepreneurship. But for those that don't have that person in their life, father figure, or mother figure, or anyone, family or friendship, or friends as part of their group, it's very difficult for them to, I would think, to find that inspiration, because that spending that time with someone and seeing them succeed is, when you're young and impressionable, it's a powerful lesson in sort of do as I do. Rather than simply do as I say. And I think as kids, that's certainly for someone like myself, I was really receptive to that kind of idea. I can see someone be successful and be like, okay, I'll do that because you've proven it. And for those that don't have that sort of provable model close by, that's a big barrier in their ability to move on. I mean,
Totally.
How do you think people can I think it's almost impossible to replicate, but maybe create some foundational stones of, right, you can go and do it, you can be confident, you can go and set up a business, you can set the foundational stones, because that's a huge element of it, right? That first step.
Absolutely. I think it's really hard because, being in a fortunate enough position where even being able to fall back at your mum and dad's house, there's a spare room there, maybe. It might not be the most glamorous room, it might not be the coolest thing to say on your Tinder date, but to at least have that level of support is really fundamental, I think, to being able to take that first step into going into business. And as you say, it's not very easy to do that. Sometimes creating a business can be teased out of you through doing really well at work and getting a load of great clientele on, and then representing somebody else's company and saying, you know what, I've brought on these clients myself. These guys are with this company. Yes, it's got a reputation and all that, but I brought them on. They're here for me. I've got the personality. I've got the connections, and I met them at the table. I was the one who found them and sourced them. And it's sometimes it can happen through developing yourself in your career. I imagine it's very hard to just, as a 18 to 20 something year old, to just step into the business world if you don't have the steadiest foundation behind you beforehand. And that's why maybe a lot of people might become entrepreneurs at a later date, after they've kind of proven their track record through conventional means. But ultimately every scenario is so different. And one thing I would say, which is what I was going to touch on before, is like sometimes it's just a stroke of luck. It's
absolutely.
Literally fate, and whether you believe in fate or not, I don't know if I do, but sometimes like it's moments like this where I'm like, I wonder, because when I went traveling and my dad came into my bedroom and with his A4 sheet of paper, and he said, right, son, you're pretty dumb, so no good at maths, no good at this, whatever. Well, no, not that bad, but he was like, here's a list of careers that suit your level of academia and also are, are future-proof, energy, green energy, geography, environmental science. And it was all, my dad's a big advocate in like green energy and the future and electric, whatever it may be. So it was all these jobs that were kind of, that he thought was a good idea. So I went through it. When I got into Sussex University, I chose environmental science, which was not me. I did it because I was the few subjects that I was good at. I was good at geography and I was good at biology. And that's because I took an interest in them. And actually, more so than anything else, it's because I had good teachers who could relate to me in them, and that was super important. So I had that list, went for that, and then I went travelling, and then halfway through travelling, the university cancelled that course and said, environmental science no longer exists, we've cancelled it, not enough demand, whatever it is, which is a shame, right? Because it's an important subject, and no discredit to people who are doing that course, but it wasn't for me. And I didn't realise that at that point. They then said, here's a very short list of subjects that you have enough credits for and that will allow you to do with us. And on that list was was industrial engineering and design. And I was good at art. I got straight A's in art because I was creative and that was my skill. So I thought, industrial design, that sounds great. Why didn't I think of that before? Because I just didn't know. As an 18-year-old, you don't know about what careers and how they're going to lead you. So I selected it, and that changed the trajectory of my life. And now we're here.
That's amazing.
So, and that was just chance. That was just, they cancelled. And I would have, otherwise I would have been a scientist, probably, an environmental scientist or something like that. I would have probably, I might be out doing soil samples, I might be in the lab doing what I would hope is cutting edge stuff, but it would have not been in anything like what I'm doing right now. And it might not have been as entrepreneurial as what I am now, because this is where I use the full arsenal of my personal skill set that I'm capable of through design, creativity, conceptualization, ideation, and even a little bit of mathematics and engineering. Oh, believe it or not.
Not too adventurous.
No.
But it's one of those things where, because touching on that luck point and fate a little bit, I mean, it's, whether you believe or not, it's separate, each to their own.
It's just luck, I guess.
But there are those few moments that you look back on in life. Probably at the time you don't appreciate it because you're probably looking at this list and going, "How the fuck am I going to graduate from Sussex?" I've got 5 choices. Exactly. I'll pick one, and then when you graduated, I think you moved to Dubai at the tender age of 23. With this pretty good degree behind you, but what do you do with it? How do you deal with it? How do you get a job doing it? How do you set up a business doing it? Those are all elements that you figure out. But that luck element of going, I just picked something else, but actually we cancelled it. And that's incredible. And I'm sure entrepreneurs that are listening, or people that are thinking back through their lives and seeing those key moments that happen, some are real anchor moments in people's lives. I think that's what we really mean when we're saying engage with your day or appreciate the day, because you never know. And when your day is filled with those moments, as with business owners, you get thrown different ideas, you're in the mix of stuff. Most of the time you don't know what's coming every day because it's just good luck.
And
literally I wake up and go, let's go. What's going to happen today? But that's the fun element. But coming back to you graduated Sussex, you've got this incredible degree, and at the tender age of 23, now you go to Dubai and get a job and then set up Generation 3D with now one of your closest mates.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that journey. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, well, it's funny. So my business partner / best friend, we'd grown up in Spain together. So his name's Dominic Wright. He's the co-founder of Generation 3D, this first company that we both came up with together, and he's also the co-founder of Sauna and Plunge as well. And we've known each other. We met back in Spain when I first got over there. I turned up at school in year 6. In year 1 at 6 years old. And for some fucking reason, my parents, we kind of literally, it was just awesome. We arrived, got, here we are, we're in Spain, get your shit together, fucking off you go. I arrived in school with some school bags in a Tesco shopping bag.
Oh my God.
I didn't even have time to have a backpack. And I walked into this class and the teacher introduced me. This is Max, with his Tesco bag. Someone look after him, and Dominic said, I'll do that. And he remembers, he tells me about it, and the teacher went, this is Max, would you like to introduce yourself? And I just went with my bag just flapping against there. Dominic was like, I'll sort him out.
Yeah.
Went off, grabbed me, took me under his wing, popped my Tesco bag into my new little cubby hole at school, and that was it.
Wow.
6 years old, best friends since then. We share exactly the same birthday, coincidentally.
That's pretty cool.
I'm literally several hours older than him. And we ended up going to the same university, just purely by chance and points and a little bit of, which one are you going to? But there could have been so many deviations to that as well.
Yeah.
And then he went to Dubai because I went traveling for a year. He didn't do that, so he did his academia at university, did a year in London, then went off to Dubai, and I did the same. So I travelled, then I went to university, saw him off whilst I was still a year in uni, and I actually did my first year work experience actually in England at an engineering firm doing 3D printing.
Okay.
Where I got a basic job, but I was for a small little engineering company, only like 10 to 12 other employees. So I was assigned like a big role of setting up the printers, these large 3D printers, learning how they work and actually creating that division. And I went to visit Dominic out in Dubai on holiday, and we had fun, a little bit of drinking, a lot of showing around. This is Dubai. This is, let's go out into the desert on the bikes, just having a great holiday. And we got talking about business ideas and my skill and his skill. And we ended up basically talking about wouldn't it be great to form this company? So a 3D printing company that caters for X, Y, and Z out in Dubai, because architectural models were big out there, and we could revolutionize the way we were going to do it, and 3D printing was just so unavailable out there. So I had that skill, he had the contacts and the sales, and he's just one of the most cunning businessmen I know, and he's a sales machine. He's a god at business development and networking. And I flew back home, quit my job, wrote up a business plan, because I just knew I wanted to work with him. And I wanted to be out there. I don't know why. I just got a feeling. I'm not particularly materialistic and into some of the connotations that are known with Dubai and stuff like that. I was there for driving a business, for the opportunities, and for the gap in the market. That's what I was there for, and that's what kept me going through it as well, because I don't resonate with some of the values that a lot of people resonate with Dubai, but I think it's a highly competitive and highly cohesive environment to set up a business that I think Dubai excels in. They're excellent at it.
Why do you think that is?
Because they just have a real modern approach to catering for startups, business needs, and things like that. Like you, and that's from a living perspective, like a personal perspective, but also from a commercial perspective. You get there, you can get all of your things, your bills, internet bills, your utility bills, energy bills. It's all there. You can put it all in one app. There's a minimal amount of companies you have to deal with to get set up. Transactions are quick, easy, things happen fast. You've got a lot of people out there who are all striving, because it's such a competitive environment. You've got a lot of people just striving to give you the best service, so you kind of get what you pay for out there. And it's just, and of course it's just, there's a lot of things going on there. There's lots of investment, and for us in 3D printing, when it was so niche out there, it was just well placed, right place, right time. But I say that lightly because whilst we were setting up, there were probably 10 to 15 other 3D printing companies that were all setting up at the same time in the same city, and 80% of them are gone now. So it is.
You just kicked their ass, or just
in essence, like either we outcompete them, or they just didn't have the right strategy, and they thought that they could do this and do that, and they tried to do a bit of everything, because 3D printing is a tool that kind of, if you have all the resources in the world, you can kind of do anything. We can 3D print this, we can 3D print architectural models, we can 3D print interiors, we can do prosthetics, we can do medical devices, we can do engineering components, whatever. But if you set up a business and you're under-resourced and you're trying to do everything, then you're going to really quickly start stumbling into problems. One thing that Dominic was very good at was keeping us very steady on a path, and specializing and focusing on our specific niche, which at the time was architecture, and that's what we focused on. We didn't deviate from that, so that was really important, and from that level of focus we were able to funnel all of our resources into one purpose, one goal, streamline all of our pipeline into that specific. Everything was just streamlined into that direction, rather than kind of scattered around. So that was partly due to his leadership and his ability to understand where the market was at, and create the contacts and the sales pipeline, and be very selective about who he chose. And then he would come and say, right, I've got the most ridiculous, impossible assignment for you, and we got a week to deliver it, and that's when I would get to work and trying to make those things happen. Yeah,
that's amazing, because actually, just before we jump on the co-founder side, because I'd love to understand the relationship between you and Dominic, because it's clear your skill sets, the technical lead, and he was a sales lead. But in that run-up where you came back from Dubai, having spoken to Dominic, obviously inspiring you a little bit, as he probably showed you a bit of Dubai and showed you what the opportunities were available. And this was back in 2014, when it wasn't cool to be there. Like nowadays, where everyone post-COVID and trying to get desperately out there.
Taking Instagrams of them in hotels on beaches.
No judgment. The feeling that you had, that you knew that this was just something that you should do, had to do, wrote up that business plan probably in about 10 minutes, because you just, that feeling of
just motivated through, right?
Is just take me back to that moment. What was that feeling like, and how did you know that was something that you needed to do?
I think it was a case of, so to get very specific in like the ingredients. So I had 3D printing skill set that could range to a wide range of things, right? But what we found when we were walking around malls and just being around Dubai was, he pointed out to an architectural model. In fact, I pointed out to it, and I was like, there's a lot of these architectural models around, like, what are they for? What's the deal with them? It was like, these are all, they're all for development's a huge thing out there. Property development. These architectural models, what are they all about? Well, these mean a lot. These are literally a developer's key pitching tool, the key sales element to selling a building or a cluster of buildings that represents 2,000 individual units, which represents the sales of some 10 to 20 million dollars worth of revenue. So that one model is their tool to do that. Everything else is just a bit of renders, pamphlets, and salespeople, right? But that is their tool. They pay a lot of money for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I said, really, how much? And he was like, well, I mean, that one's probably worth, because he had a lot of people. His uncle worked in development there. He's also develops buildings out there as well. So he had experience with this, and he was like, well, apparently they're worth. Apparently, what I've been told is like something like that's probably worth like $200,000.
$200,000.
$200,000. Like, no way.
Yeah.
200, 300,000. When we set up the business, then we realized no, they weren't worth that much.
Okay.
But may you go big enough? Yes, they are. But actually, it turns out that the 200 grand model that we thought it would be is more like 50 to 80 grand, something like that. Still a lot of money, but then that's where reality sets in, right? And that's where that oh fuck moment happens. We're setting up a business, but that's where the rubber meets the road. And it's like, all right, well, this is crunch time. It's not what we thought it was. We have to adapt to that scenario now. But there's still clearly money in it. And we can still do this. We just have to produce more. We have to be more cunning about the way we do it and produce it. Or the clients we pick, or whatever strategy it would be at the time. But essentially, these models, people pay a lot of money for them. How are they made? All manually, like a bloody labor intensive Mikado set. And that's where I said I could 3D print all this shit. Can easily figure out a way to streamline this process. So how do they do that? How do they do that? How do they do that? And I started looking into it, and I was like, if we invest, take a loan out and invest X amount, it turned out to be, it was a hefty loan. It was 150 grand to get the 3D printing equipment, a large industrial 3D printing 3D printer, along with all the consumables and everything. And if we apply ourselves and I try and find a way to reverse engineer how these architectural models are made and apply it and redesign and redistribute all of the outputs in a way that's conducive to this new 3D printing approach, then we can make bank here. We can build a successful business. And so it was about really discovering a highly tangible set of mechanisms or a set of approaches that will 100% create a business if you can perfect the ingredients. And it was very clear. It was, this is in demand. This is a niche that is, again, in high demand and is required specifically in this city. Dominic has the clientele. He knows the industry. He can, whilst he was only there for a year, and he's also 23 years old, a little kid who knows F all about it all, but he can. Know he can. And he knew he can. You had that, again, what I was saying before, that youth on your side, that naivety, that ignorance. And to be honest, ignorance is bliss. When you're that young and you're trying, because you have to be ignorant, you have to be ballsy, and you have to be naive, and you have to be stupid to a lot of it, and just roll with the punches and just go in and throw yourself in. And then, we have the technology to reimagine how it's done before. This was done, you need a workshop with 20 laborers, 3 or 4 giant laser cutting machines, digital designers, AutoCAD designers, logistics managers. You need all of that. We were able to, through a few decisions on how to structure our business, able to reduce all of that. These 20 laborers that we would have hypothetically needed went down to me, basically, for the first year, and this machine. which did all the labor for us because
Yeah.
it was a machine and it prints and it builds. Now it's not as simple to say that it prints glass and it prints electrics and it prints this and that, but you fill in the gaps where it doesn't work. But we're able to make that work through that specific set of ingredients and understanding that at that particular time, in that particular place, we came to a realization that this new technology had the capacity to outflank and outperform a traditional form of delivering a product, and we took that opportunity.
Yeah, because that's where, as you say, youth on your side with that little bit of ignorance helps you helps you sort of put those pieces into place and say, right, well, let's go for it. Because I know when you're older, that sort of voice in the back of your head that goes, what if this doesn't work out? What if we can't pay this 150 grand loan?
How do we pay the school bills?
Massive. Yeah. How do we pay all the rest of it? And if you're building a business, sometimes you have people, you have employees that you're responsible for. So all those things sit in the back of your mind and go, what if this happens? And that's where people get stuck. And they say, right, actually, this is too much risk. I'm not going to take that jump.
Totally.
But what I'm hearing from you is actually sometimes when you're a bit younger, it helps you to ignore that or not even have that voice. And actually, it's not so much of a jump. There is a stepping stone into that because before we've even committed any funds, we're talking about a bit of research, talking about you having some long chats with Dominic, with your co-founder, assigning responsibilities. You're going to be the tech guy. He's going to be the sales guy. And building out a business plan, knowing that you can take on a market which is probably a bit sluggish and not up to scratch on the tech side, and you're being innovative and different, and you could outcompete those guys on pricing. So once you kind of get all those ingredients, which I think to people who are listening, if they've got their own business idea that perhaps has those ingredients, the only thing that's stopping you is making that first step. And for you, that first step was actually ignoring all the other bits and just saying, well, let's do it because we're young and let's just crack on. To those who are a bit older, who maybe have some responsibilities and have the mortgage to pay, the partners, the kids, if you are the age you are now, 10 years wiser, a few more responsibilities, do you think you would have jumped in the same way, or what would you have done differently?
I mean, I think, ultimately, of course not, right? You'd never be able, you'd have a whole different set of roles and responsibilities and personal norms to adhere to and pay for and fund before taking such a big risk like that. So it'd be a hugely different set of scenarios and a much bigger risk to take on, which is why I think as the older you get and the more you build the infrastructure around you, which you have to maintain, you have to oil and scrub and clean and fund and look after and cherish and nourish with your children, your wife, whatever it may be, your car, your home, your mortgage, whatever it may be, it becomes very difficult to take that step. So I think at that point it's really about leveraging. Again, at that time, I had 1 year's worth of experience in industry to leverage and to draw upon, and a little bit of university knowledge. That's not to undervalue like what you learn at university. It was those core skills that allowed me to do so much. However, you're a fucking student. Sit down, kiddo. You ain't.
Did you ever face that in Dubai? Like, you're young, you don't know what you're doing.
A lot of the time, we had a lot of luck on our side at that point, because as you say, I think at that point in Dubai was reimagining itself. It was stepping into the tech world at that time. And here you have these two young but just old enough, just with a few little hairs here, and could hold themselves in a conversation and just draw the 2 to 3 years experience of work experience between them to draw out a conversation and tease a client into, winning them over. I think being expats from the West, where a lot of the technology comes from at the time, being and also in that specific industry, I don't want to sound ageist or whatever or biased, but technology is young and young is technology. Do you know what I mean? So I actually think, bizarrely, that youth was, and we were just borderline, but because we looked quite young and had a fresh approach, and it was a tech-focused business, they were literally, I know every decision for the first year or two was, let's go with these kids, fuck it. But we were able to just cling on to that, and we were lucky enough to be in the right industry that represented youth, that technology was all about youth and people coming from students, and it was the whole garage, startup environment, shit going on in Silicon Valley, all these 18-year-olds setting up tech businesses and all that, and I think people projected all these romantic ideas and scenes and stories from what they would hear in the news about Silicon Valley, and they would almost project it onto myself and Dom and be like, well, these must be the cool tech kids from England, setting up in Dubai, doing cool shit with 3D printing and stuff like that. And so very fortunately we had that visual element on our side as well.
That's incredible.
But
and going back to luck, I mean, actually going back even further to what we were talking about the background that you had and being brought up in southern Spain, that sort of confidence it gave you to meet new people, engage with different cultures, and what I'm hearing actually quite a lot, and what I see quite a lot with other clients as well, is that confidence is such a key differentiator.
Absolutely.
And confidence isn't something that you can just dig up from anywhere. It's something that builds up within you for a whole variety of reasons, and you can be confident about certain things and not confident about others, so it's even more of a complex sort of to some extent skill set. I mean, it's really a key differentiator, and what I would love for the audience to hear is, if you do lack confidence, how do you get it? And for me, it was finding like the easy wins, because you can do something. You can always do something. And you can always rely on something that you're doing that you can contribute to. So even if, accountancy is actually quite a good sort of example of that, where you've got a qualification. So you know how to do it. It's just about applying the knowledge you've got to your client and managing that. And half the time it's not really a complex idea. It's more about how you deliver the concepts and how you work with the client, the process behind it. And that's your sort of little difference as an accountant that you can bring up. So for those people that perhaps lack a bit of confidence, and maybe they've got everything in place, maybe they've got the ingredients, they've got the people, they've maybe even got a bit of funding behind them, but just that first step is just really difficult for them to take for whatever reason. What would you say to that person that's sort of umming and ahhing?
Okay, so I feel like I've got some potentially good advice here.
Let's not get too ahead of us.
So I mean, first of all, I had a partner as well who managed to at least when it came to client facing as well, we'd always do meetings together, but one thing that helped is brushing shoulders with someone who didn't share the same values as you or understand the processes as you, right? So I'm very confident in how I can deliver things and the process, just like accounting, behind 3D printing, the engineering behind it, and how we're going to go about delivering a product. But what I wouldn't say in front of or to a client is what I don't deem easy or impossible or whatever. And a famous quote from Richard Branson, right, who's also quite a relatable entrepreneur who's been incredibly successful, but is relatable because he's just a real person, isn't he?
Yeah.
But it's say yes, whatever it is, say yes, we can do it, and figure it out afterwards.
Yeah.
Whether you can or you can't. And that's the approach my business partner Dominic had. So we would sit in a meeting and they would say, can you do this? And I'm just sat there like, because we need it in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And Dominic would, yes.
Yeah, we got it. We've done loads before.
Easy. Fuck that? No, nothing. No worries.
Max can do it blindfolded.
And yeah, literally. And I would have my foot stamped on and my hand squeezed, and I would just sit there in silence and be like, oh shit, here we go. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, the product was delivered. It was not easy, but it was delivered.
Yeah.
And we were paid, and the client was satisfied, and it was the next stepping stone to building up our business, and every single meeting went basically that way.
Yeah.
So basically what I'm saying is, from the starting points of setting up our business and taking on those first deals, no deal came easy. Every single project that we basically did always had the impossible element to it. It's basically something I've called like, it's just an element that's just like, this can't really be done in conventional hours with a conventional team and all that. You always have to, as an entrepreneur, you have to move heaven and hell to deliver projects. And that's how I spent 8 to 10 years of my life it was 8 years of my life in Dubai with Generation 3D, constantly moving heaven and hell to deliver the concept and the product. And that's how I grew confidence in being able to do it. And had I not had Dominic to say, yes, we can do it, whatever, we'll do it, then we wouldn't have a business. So it's really important, confidence-wise, to just back yourself. And I think you have to push the envelope on every sale that you do. When the client asks for more, you just have to say yes and deliver more, and that's how you'll graduate as a company, and that's how you'll keep and maintain and grow your business.
And that's really powerful because so many people who want to start a business and have the ideas, and they get stuck in this sort of analysis paralysis. And I know it's sort of a cliched term or whatever, but so many people common. So common. And between the ages of generally late 20s and sort of early 40s, there's a bank of brilliant people, well, especially in the UK anyway, where all they need is that little nudge, and something is just not making them do it. And I think the powerful thing I think you spoke about was that sometimes it's just about saying yes to something and just delivering it and just having a go, and that win will spur you to say yes to those same things because you've done it already, and that gives you more confidence. And then there's another impossible thing that clients always ask for, and then you've got into the habit of saying yes, so you say yes again, but it's that first one, it's that first yes that you just got to just something within you has to say yes. Or you've got Dominic grabbing you, kicking and screaming, saying, we're going to say yes to this, you figure it out, which is actually quite a powerful dynamic between the two of you, that he goes, look, Max is my best mate, he's a smart guy, he's got this tech stuff, I know he's going to do it, and no doubt you pushed him on other elements of the business, helping him realise what the business is capable of, pushing the tech that you've got, enhancing it, and then actually delivering. Because that's Dominic's making that promise on behalf of the business, and you as his co-founder have got to be like, right, I've got my guys back, he said yes, I've got to figure it out, let's do it. And that's where, if people are lacking a bit of confidence, having someone with you, whoever that may be, can help you spur on to say yes to more things. Because it's for me, it's devastating because whilst I'm an accountant and fine, you get to do a whole bunch of work in setting up companies, the real privilege I feel I have is I have a front row seat in a lot of people's success. So I get to see all these really cool things happen. I mean, just like we saw on Plunge, we haven't even touched on that yet, and that's really exciting. So, I joined the journey sort of only a few years ago, and learning about even now some of the things you're saying about Generation 3D it's really interesting to apply, how you felt, what it meant to say yes, obviously the age you're at, some of the challenges you faced, in building now what is a now 10-year-old business. Obviously Dominic's taking a bit more of the reign now, given you're over here, but you've built the foundations of something pretty special. And now Generation 3D, I think you said it has over 50 employees and is going to go on for hopefully many years, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be catering to, we will potentially be expanding back into the UK. We're looking at expanding into Saudi, and
wow,
and we've got over 50 employees, and we're growing year on year at such a tremendous rate with our revenue and just the team and the company, and our biggest issue often is, where do we find the next factory facility where we can grow into? That's actually been the biggest bane of my existence throughout the whole course, because it's hard to find space in Dubai in the best areas. So, but it's a really privileged position to be in. The first step to setting up my first business in Dubai was, pack all your bags up in your entire life into 2 bags, board a one-way flight, 8 hours across the world, and set up I was in a maid's room, so like a small, I think what a prisoner in the US would call like a 2x4. So basically a small cell with a little single bed, a wall. I had a shelf, and that was it. I had a shelf above my bed. Everything else was packed in my bag. I was living in that room for a year. And I had in the room I had the single bed space and a walkway space, and that was it. And then I shared the bathroom. I had to walk out of the house to get back into the house because it was detached from the house. Thankfully, this was a room that was available to me from Dominic, where Dominic was living, and a close group of friends that he'd made, and some friends that I knew from back home. So immediately I felt at home, but it was a really big challenge, essentially like living in what could be construed as a sort of a comfortable prison cell with a window about yay big. I couldn't bed in for 2 to 3 years. I didn't have the money to. I wasn't paying myself a salary. I was living off. Another thing was I was living off my grandma had just passed away that same year. That's one thing that was almost the catalyst of saying, okay, this is the last star that fell into alignment, so I can go and do that. Because my grandma passed away that year in 2014, and she left inheritance to the rest of us, to the rest of the family. We had a big family, and it wasn't a huge deal, but it was enough. It was I got £30,000, and that was enough to put into the capital of the business.
So I want to go back a little bit to like the practical elements of setting up the business, because I think people, let's say someone's got the confidence, they've got the ingredients, and the biggest practical element is often funding. And you mentioned very kindly you got some money from your grandmother's inheritance, £30,000, which is a lot of money. Then I think you mentioned a loan of 150k, which you have to be of good financial standing to obtain that, and maybe have some connections or whatever. But on the other hand, your business is clearly very capital intensive. You know, to buy the freaking 3D printer, which is not £5.50. So completely understand. But on the practical side, when I talk to clients, especially when they have a certain level of responsibilities, I usually say save up 2 years worth of operational expenses from the home, and at least have a bit of runway in the business. These will all change depending on the business.
Yeah.
But 6 to 9 months is a good runway, because at some point within that, most businesses will start becoming revenue generating, etc. And that can take a while.
Yeah.
That can take a while to build up that kind of level of capital.
No, totally. And it completely depends on what style of business that you're trying to run.
And for people who are looking at these sums of money, and a lot of people, this is a lot of money that we're talking about for startup capital. But for those that don't have that kind of capital, and they're trying to get it, is that something where you would encourage friends and family to come in terms of experience on that?
A lot of our capital, again, that was from inheritance. That 30 grand from my grandmother. And then the rest was also sort of compiling funds together from all family members to not for a business loan, but actually for essentially a payment plan for the printer. So that was all went straight to another company, and then so essentially it was a loan, but it was essentially all went straight into the equipment.
Yeah.
And that was the only way we could have done it at the time.
Yeah.
So I think it's really difficult to just be able to walk up to a bank or a body that just offers loans out, and if you find that the rates aren't working for you or whatever, I think maybe it's worth going back to the drawing board, not giving up, but going back to the drawing board and re-strategizing, because I think you'll be surprised if you've got a good enough idea, and if you're, a trustworthy enough person, if your friends value your opinion, and if and your family value your opinion, I think you'll be surprised how many people will back you on your journey. But at the same time, you do need to be careful not to give too much of your equity away and to essentially cut down your business into too many piles and offer that out to potentially strangers.
When you mean equity, you mean shareholding in your business, right? You mean giving 5% to Uncle Joe, who's giving you 10 grand at the start because he's a very nice uncle and he backs you, but at the end of the day, he's got X% in your business, which at the start always seems
great.
Like it's amazing.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
In 5 years' time,
Joe doesn't care. He's not going to have an opinion, but in 5 years' time, he definitely will.
Yeah.
And also throughout the journey, when you're understanding how your business works in year 2, year 3, year 4, and Uncle Joe hasn't a clue, but he thinks he does, because he's invested in your business now and he wants to be heard. I'd be very wary of taking money from a stranger or someone who's a little bit, or family that you can trust, and more importantly, they can trust you to just say, look, Max, this is your business. I've invested in you as an individual. I've not invested in your business. So whatever decision you make is the decision that I'm going to back. And I've seen with other friends of mine who've gone through very similar journeys, have had their businesses almost stripped from them through bringing on new investors, and their world has collapsed on them as a result of that. And this is at the beginning stages or in the intermediate stages, when they're really doing really well and building up, and they're so ambitious that they want to get to the next stage. They want that IPO, they are sky high. They want to be the Steve Jobs, and sometimes, they want that 100-meter mega yacht in Saint-Tropez, and sometimes I've had chats with them at certain moments when we're on holiday. I literally brought him on holiday to pull him out of that world, because he couldn't stop talking about just this and this. And so I stopped talking about business for a second.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he had essentially push him out and take over his business. So it's a really, really tricky set of scenarios to deal with.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's when you're young or you're just starting out in business, your equity is your gold dust.
Yeah.
I've seen it so many times where clients will come to me and say, right, I've got a business idea. I've got a few family members that want to give me a little bit of money. I'm going to give them 25% of my business, and they're going to get 25% of the profits, and that's how they're going to get repaid back. And I went, that sounds great right now. When you're projecting,
that's a lot
profit
of equity,
but that's a substantial portion. I mean, they're going to have 25% say in a lot of decisions you're making. My advice, professional advice, is you can take money from family and friends. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think that can be the most flexible capital available to you. The banks aren't going to help you out.
It might be the only capital available to you as well.
Correct. But always structure it as some form of loan. So you owe them.
Absolutely.
Give them a rate of return, which is the interest on it, if you want to
pay a higher rate of interest as well.
That's fine.
If they say, no, I want equity, I feel like it's just saying, well, how about another 2% on top of what the average rate is?
And that's fine.
Because that will be more worth it.
Yeah, because if you give me 10 grand, I'll give you 20 grand back in 2 years' time.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure most people will take that deal. Yeah. But if you give them 5% of your business, that 5% could be worth a lot more than that £10,000 that you're giving back, or the 20k total. So you've got to project yourself in 3, 4, 5 years' time. What if this goes well?
One of the most fundamental things as well, from more of a selfish or entrepreneurial point of view, is fucking back yourself.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it, just do it. If you are already giving away large shareholdings away from your company, large amounts of equity away, then that says a lot about how you value yourself and how much you're backing yourself into this venture. If you're giving large quantities of equity away, then you're already shuddering at the first hurdle. So you need to be strong, and it's really difficult because you're not in a good negotiating position. But one of the key things of business is to act strong when you're weak and look weak when you're strong.
If you want selling part of your business, you want to get the value out of it.
Yeah.
And if when you've got nothing, you're selling 10% of your business for £10,000, great, because it's worth nothing. Yeah. But the potential value is where people always argue over. And when you're at the start, nothing. But when you're 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line, suddenly it's worth a huge amount of money. Yeah. And your uncle, auntie, mum, dad, whoever is sitting pretty. And whilst you might rely on that relationship to say, look, come on, you can give me my shareholding back now. Mm-hmm. Actually, it's a different ballgame. If
once money comes into the picture, things change.
Completely. And it's for me, I always...
And the niceties go out the window.
All the time. I've got so many stories of siblings or family members screwing each other over because money's hit the table.
Yeah.
And or cousins seem to be rogue nowadays. Last year it was brothers, but it's just honestly, it's just one of those things where it's all nice and well and good, and there's a fuzzy feeling about it. But at the end of the day, this is a professional environment where you have to say to people, "Look, I'm happy, really grateful that you want to give me money, but this is the only structure I'm willing to deal with."
And this is a business transaction.
The thing that we've touched on so often throughout our conversation is Dominic, and the power of having a good co-founder who, from what I'm hearing, complemented a lot of your skill set, and you complemented his, of course. I know this is a bit of an open-ended question, but what is the value of Dominic to you as a business leader?
Good question. Aside from being a vain, self-righteous asshole, no, he's honestly he's brilliant. And aside from being like my life partner in many ways, I would say, I mean, he's 100% of the business to me, because it wouldn't exist without him. So I value, everything that he does, his opinions and all that. I mean, it's hard to, quantify in percentage, but I take into account, I take into deep thought, and I respect and I value, and he'll do the same for me. Dominic and I, our relationship goes so far back, and as I said to you, I'm not married yet, but I've certainly been married before to Dominic.
Yeah.
And I've been married to Dominic now for 10 years.
Has he ever pissed you off?
Yes.
Don't answer that question too quickly.
Generation 3D, this 3D printing business that we were doing, there were points where you're building this business, and the first 1 to 3 years is struggle, right? Scatty, crafty organization, and figuring out deals and taking jobs wherever it comes from, and just dealing with that and moving so fast and so I guess scatty that you don't even have time to kind of qualify or quantify how each other are working. You're just working towards keeping your business alive and getting it set up and getting it done. Then you get through this phase after 2-3 years potentially of stabilization, and your business is stable, it's doing well, and now you're making important decisions on how are we going to grow it. Are we going to move premises? Where are we going to move? Do you agree on this location? We need this equipment, and so on. You're actually starting to make real important growth decisions that's going to define the direction and the tangent your business is going to go in. Are we going to go into medical? Are we going to stay in architecture? Are we also going to touch on engineering? Whatever it may be. That's where you show your cards in business as founders, and you've worked towards this goal, blood, sweat, tears, relationships, mortgages, whatever it may be. There is no limit to the amount of arguments you can have with your business partner in one single day, and it is mental. Honestly, how it can push and pull and pressure you and turn the one person who is essentially your best friend in life, and at that point in time the most important person in the world to you, and it can pit you head on head against each other, and it can do that day in, day out for years. And that's how I felt throughout a lot of that journey. We got to the point where we went from the bestest of friends ever to arch enemies, to my nemesis.
Yeah.
And it took probably a year to, and at this point we had 20 to 25 employees, and there was just so much to deal with. There was so much stress. He was bringing on so much work, and I was having to deal with so much delivery, and it was just challenging. And don't get me wrong, there were days throughout that where we were partners and friends, and it was functional and it was great. And I think whenever you removed both of us from the office, it was always kind of, okay, swords are down, let's have a drink. But then it did get to the point where even outside of work I couldn't bear him.
Yeah,
I couldn't.
How did you get back on track? Because that's quite a serious emotional position to be in.
Huge, and that's how so many partnerships end. We began to look within ourselves at how to resolve this problem without really even talking much to each other about it. And we took that responsibility on ourselves, because we're both realizing that, at this point, what would it be like? 16, 18 years of history is circling the drain right now indefinitely. And no amount of money or business success was worth our friendship. I got to a point where I'd lost so much self-esteem that I was too scared to even walk into a meeting. You know, I didn't know what I could do, what I was capable of. I'd lost everything. I'd lost all my confidence.
Why was that? Was that just because nothing was feeling like nothing was going right, or
kind of everything was business was going well, but it's always when business is going well and you and other co-founders now have to make a decision in what direction you want to pull. And really what often happens is the person who talks the best, who articulates himself the best, and who's maybe the best salesperson or the best person at arguing usually wins that
discussion.
That discussion. And I'm not a salesman. I'm not someone who can argue a point. I'm not highly articulate. Whereas some people are just quick and easy, and they can just win over a room very quickly. And it was kind of that level of that approach that I have, that like how I work as an individual, that also made me worry about and question my worth. Why can't I do these things? Why can't I be as articulate as my business partner is? Why can't I sell? Why can't I? Man, if I leave Generation 3D and set up my own thing, can I do it? Has he been pulling all the weight this whole time? Have I been doing much? Has this all been him, or has it been me? And suddenly all of this self-doubt comes into play. And I'd never had that before. So it really hit me hard, and anxiety really set in, and I had lost myself as a businessman, as an entrepreneur, as an individual. I was too scared to face my friends. I was too scared to socialize. I had no self-worth. I lost it all. And it happened so quickly and lasted for more than I care to remember and mention. And just as quickly as it went, slowly began to come back, and you pause and you realize no, I can do it, and you build yourself out of this. You sort of climb your way out of this hole that should have never existed in the first place of self-doubt, and you start to realize, wait a second. And basically what was the cause of that was admitting to myself all of my flaws, everything that I'm shit at and rubbish at. Of course I am, because I can't be good at everything. But this is what I'm good at. Operationally, this is what I can do. Design-wise, this is what I can do. Conceptual, ideation, project management, managing a team, operations, like that's my skill set. And why was I trying to compare myself to Dominic at his best in what he knows? Because I know if he tried to compare himself to what I do, he would crumble. And that's the whole point of having a business partner, and sharing out those skill sets to diversify your resources upon a business and tackle it and cover every angle, basically, and not worry about. The whole point of having him there was so I didn't have to worry about all that stuff. So why was I comparing myself against it?
I think it's important for people to know, who are maybe starting out the entrepreneurial journey or partway through it, that it's not just the bad times that create the stress. It's actually also the good times. And an entrepreneurial journey is not just this fuzzy feeling of making money, and then maybe sometimes you don't. And then you get the cash flow crunches and all the big decisions you have to make. It's actually every aspect of it. And you have to be prepared to deal with all of it.
Yeah.
And whatever challenge comes your way. And having a good co-founder can help a lot with that.
Being a business owner, you mature quickly.
Yeah.
And you learn. And I feel like going into my actual relationship with my girlfriend is a lot. You know, I've already spent 8 to 10 years married, so I know I know what I need to do. I know how to
she gets the benefit of all that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's tricky, and that's the thing that you just need to overcome as a business owner, I suppose.
Yeah, it's interesting because again, with the clientele, I'm thinking about sort of male co-founders, female co-founders, and maybe mixed co-founders. And what I see a lot, and it's pure observation, I don't know if this is generic, but you find that men tend to actually not talk to the other partner very well, especially male or female. Just they're very introspective, and if they feel they're right, they'll just get a stubborn position, and just come what may, that is the position. Yeah. And then at some point, as you say, maturity kind of kicks in, a bit of logic kicks in some cases, not every case, and then you punch through to a decision, and then you progress. But with female co-founders, I think they're a lot better at talking about things. And I think that's sort of, to some extent, like the power of having sort of slightly different energy in the room, which is that it creates that platform for conversation. And because there's that conversation, instead of things being pent up and then, assumptions flying around, actually there is a discussion that happens. Exactly. For better or for worse, don't get me wrong, it doesn't always, opening up sort of that emotional aspect to decisions doesn't always go well. But I do feel that men would be slightly better off if they did have more conversations, and just explain how they feel sometimes. And it's always a difficult thing to do because it's difficult to articulate. Sometimes you're just angry because you don't like something, and that's okay. You're allowed to not like something. You might not be able to articulate why, but you're allowed to have the emotion. Also, emotions are just spurred on so quickly because you're working next to that person in a very high intensity environment, day in, day out, 5 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week, depending on what month it is. And you've been sat next to that person for 8 years. So, it's very, every single one of their tics, everything that they do, how they breathe, how they smell, how they move around. There are lots of things that can start to really piss you off in an individual. And when you were talking to Dom about sauna and plunge and potentially moving away from Dubai, and you were coming to that kind of decision, because that's huge. Where co-founders, you've been physically together for 8-9 years, and now you're saying, right, there's another opportunity. How did that conversation come about?
Dominic knew I wasn't 100% happy in Dubai. I wanted to move on. I'd been there for 7.5 to 8 years at that point. COVID had struck. We had discussed previously that I wanted to move back anyway at some point. Kind of wanted to move out of Dubai. That was all.
Was it a push thing, as in you weren't happy with some aspects, or because of your sort of background of moving around and kind of liking, getting to like different cultures, you felt like you were stuck in one place for too long?
I got itchy feet. It was I was ready for a change of pace. I wanted to go back to whether it was the UK or maybe elsewhere. We were flirting with the idea of going to America, but that conversation with Dom was extremely easy because he respected me, he respected my opinion, and I respected him. We made arrangements within that deal that suited myself and my ability to kind of gain my freedom from my desk at Generation 3D, but also gave him a bit more reward for staying there and continuing the push of driving this business solo, which is a huge decision and a huge step. So, for 8 years we'd built this business up, and his desk was here and my desk was here, and all we had to do was look right at each other or left and say, what do you think about that? yeah, okay, let's do it, let's not, or fuck you, or whatever it would be.
Yeah.
So I think for him it was a really tough thing, and for me leaving him behind out in Dubai, albeit in the best possible scenario, right? We've got a successful business, do it yourself, off you go, she's all yours.
Yeah, I can imagine. But it's one of those things where the sauna and plunge company didn't just come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right. It was
Sure.
it was a period of time in your life, I understand, where your girlfriend is Finnish,
Yes.
or Scandinavian background, and you had a bit of a passion for sort of the sauna and plunge, extreme hot, extreme cold kind of, and ecosphere system, part of your wellness, part of your mental health. One really interesting thing I want to explore with you is how you turned that sort of interest and passion into a business where you're actually making money off it, and it's to all the points we said before around professionalism, and you've got to get things right, and you've got to provide some services and value to the market, and turn something that is something that you might do sort of on a daily basis, part of a routine in the local gym or wherever, into something that actually is a business. I mean, how did you get that idea, firstly, and secondly, how did you cultivate it into a business?
That's the thing. I think so. As you mentioned, literally just then, like, cultivation is probably the key word throughout probably any business idea. It's not something that you can just sit in a chair and just tense all your muscles and dream up an idea. Bing. The best business ideas, well, who knows, but I'm not old enough and wise enough to be able to say that, but from my experience, business ideas come from a very opportune moment that derives from a set of circumstances that all fit and make sense, like Generation 3D.
Yeah.
And that did happen fairly quickly, and it was the right place. It was Dubai. It was the desert. It was obscure, brand new 3D printing technology. It was this. It was that. It worked, but it was a big risk, and it was very immediate, reactive, and innovative. I wouldn't say saunas and extreme cold immersion are particularly innovative concepts. They've been around for as long as humankind. Well, certainly ice swimming has been around for a very long time. And saunas has been around for 1,000 years. Anyway, the idea behind it, like it's essentially began from all the stresses of COVID time / pre-COVID. It was when I first met my partner, and she's from Finland. We'd go to Finland, and I got to experience that culture and how they do things in a way that I'd never had done before. In a Finnish household, you don't have baths like in England, so you have saunas instead. So it's very common that every household, even if it was an apartment, they all have saunas instead of bathtubs.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that.
Which is just one thing, and you're talking like probably 75% of households or something like that. It's ridiculous. So that's how common and institutionalized it is. And then in Finland there is something like 130,000 lakes.
Wow.
In Finland, and as you would imagine, in the winter they get all pretty bloody cold.
Yeah.
And when I first got to Finland with my girlfriend, I made the mistake of saying, we pulled up, we got our rent car, and I said, "So, where's the Lake District?"
Yeah.
And she just, literally rolled her eyes at me and said, "You're a moron," because basically the whole country is littered with it. There is no Lake District. It's the country, and it's as simple as that. And And it wasn't until that first week of exposure, when we went out there, we went to my girlfriend's uncle's nice little cabin in the woods by a lakeside, and there was complete and utter seclusion, silence beyond silence. You sit out there and, you know, at dusk, and the loudest thing is your ears ringing from the week's prior activities of being in a city, and there's still like residue, there's still like your ears are still taking that in, because there is no sound here, but you can't even hear that there's no sound because your ears are still ringing from several days prior. It's madness. I've never experienced anything like it. And then we're sat in this beautiful lake house, this small little cabin, and there's a little detached sauna, and just, you know, wood fire sauna. So you just lap in the wood, you get that thing up to like 110 degrees, and you just sweat it out, and you jump straight in the lake, and you sit in this lake having heated your core body up to a ridiculous temperature, and now suddenly you're gagging for this water that's like 4 degrees Celsius. And any normal human in any normal circumstances would take one step into that water and run away, or they would jump in and everything would shrivel, everything, their body would contort and contract, and they'd be out within seconds. But you sit in there for minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and you sit in there in complete silence, and you float, and your head pokes out, and you look ahead, and you've got trees, and you've got silence, and you've got the most still level of water that you can see the sky bounce off it perfectly. You don't know which is which, and it is just the most incredible experience that you can ever have when it comes to something like that. And it was just those repeat visits that really changed my life, I think. And that was whilst I was at Generation 3D. So I sort of started to take those visits as almost like a rehab. And then I'd go straight back to Dubai, straight back into the thick of it. But then whilst I was in Dubai, I'd start to look for little spas that I could go into, and get a little bit of a sauna hit. They'd have a plunge pool, but spas are just not that built that way. They don't really consider that as much, so you only find a few, and it was just a case of like figuring out that this is another gap in the market. You know, this is something that people don't facilitate properly, businesses don't facilitate properly, and then realizing, going to and from there more and more frequently, realizing that this is something that I really, really am growing addicted to, because of that feeling, because of that sense of sharpness that you get when you're sat in the water for so long in that cold water, and that euphoria that you get from that sensation, because it really is like no other. It's almost like a drug high. It's honestly, it's insane. And
why is that? What's the benefit of extreme heat, extreme cold? What does it do to your body?
I think so. There's a plethora, really, but going in the sauna, for example. So what that does, the benefits that has on your body is, as well as like a mental reset, it completely detoxifies your blood, right? So you sweat out any toxins. You're able to just sort of perspire any impurities from your body just through your pores, but also the heat also relaxes muscles. It helps regenerate cartilage. It has a really profound effect on your body, essentially, in that regard. And then you go into the water, into the cold water, and that stimulates this thing called growth hormone. And growth hormone is linked to essentially rebuilding things like cartilage. It helps repair ligament damage and all sorts of muscle and tissue, essentially. There's a lot of studies that can be controversial and whatnot, but I feel ultimately like, you know, there's a reason why athletes have been doing it for, you know, tens of, you know, years. And I think it's one of those things where when you have people come into sauna and plunge and they might try it for the first time or the second or third time, but they leave with such a smile on their face and such a sense of achievement, and such a reset and such a cleansing of their palate, and having kind of released themselves of the day's stresses. And that's why they come back, and that's why they sign up. Even going to the gym, it takes time to see visible results, to feel the results, and it might take 6 months, it might take 6 years, to finally get to what you had anticipated, what you wanted, what you were looking for. If you go into a cold plunge, you sit in there for 5 minutes, and pound for pound, ratio on ratio, like, it is the fastest way to get an incredible amount of health benefits, an incredible amount of mental stimulation and sharpening of the mind, and just completely resetting yourself just by sitting down. It's very uncomfortable. It's ice cold.
Yeah. Shivering away.
You're shivering like that. And it's horrible.
Yeah.
But it's 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you can stand, and you build yourself up. But you're not sat in a gym for an hour and a half. And I'm not, it's great. No, health, wellness, gyms, exercise, running, it's all amazing. I run all the time. But from someone who's done all that, who has a gym membership, who does running, who does cycling, pound for pound, I can just sit in this cold plunge for 5 minutes, and you come out of that feeling unstoppable. Your mind is sharpened to the point of a pencil. All of the problems you had, you're kind of tackling as you're in the plunge pool, just zapping away issues.
So what I want to explore is, how did you create the business idea? Like, where's the ideation coming from?
Yeah, of course. Essentially, I got the inspiration through my experiences and through my girlfriend, but then we had to actually begin to ideate the idea and create a concept and start materializing it, right? And developing all of the protocols that one needs to take on when building a business: branding, marketing, the design of the space, the engineering, and the infrastructure behind the space, with the saunas, the cold plungers, the whole filtration system, the architecture behind it, then creating operations, and a whole plan for how it was going to function, softwares, accounting, building a financial model. And these are all skills that I developed over the past 10 years of working at Generation 3D. And these are all skills that I essentially ended up having to do myself. And that's one thing I would say, it's not essential as an entrepreneur to go in and have a wide and a varied skill set, but it is extremely helpful. And going back to where I mentioned that, I got that $30,000 inheritance from my grandma, in Dubai, that gets you a month. Do you know what I mean? That feels like a lot of money, maybe in the UK or in some other countries, but in Dubai, it was £10,000 for the business license. Where here it's a couple hundred, maybe. So £10,000 for the business license and mine and Dom's visas. A huge deposit on the office. You have to have an office. You can't work out of a garage or anything like that. And then, of course, we had to fit out our office with certain materials and stuff that was suitable, and an infrastructure and setup. All of our money had gone in the first month.
Yeah.
We had like literally 1 to 2 months runway to succeed.
Yeah.
So that was for that business, and it's the same kind of thing, right? So if you want to set up a business and you're good at one and one thing only, okay, fine. That's totally fine. You want to be an entrepreneur, let's go for it. But you better be really, really bloody good at that thing, so that you can do that so well to generate enough income that you can afford to get the rest of the infrastructure around that business set up and start to pay it off very quickly. Because if you're not able to handle a lot of things separately and take on that responsibility and put in that time as well, if you don't have the time to dedicate to that, then you'll find that whatever budget you were able to bootstrap together will go very, very quickly. Especially in England.
Yeah.
If you pay for services, if you pay for the website, if you pay for the design, if you pay for a brand, then, goodbye money. So that's the thing. And I'm fortunate enough and lucky enough to have that background in through university, where the branding I did myself, the design I did myself, the interior design, the entire architectural setup and how it was going to be designed, and the user experience was all done by myself. I know CAD, computer-aided design. I designed everything from scratch. I know 3D printing. I designed all the 3D printing files so we could 3D print our tubs. I leveraged our own company, which saved us, a great deal of money in producing the 6 plunge pools that we have, all of the partition work and all of the architectural features around the space to make it a unique experience. Financial modeling, I'm used to it. I was able to do it. Taxes and other certain bits of accounting I really struggle with, which is why thankfully I got your recommendation, and that's where you came in to help us out and say, Max, don't worry, you've got this. And that's about also finding valuable partners in the business, right? People that you can trust and work with, and people who sit there, and ride that journey with you and are able to take on a certain level of stress or disorder. Like I know I can just focus on building my business and just send you whatever financials, whatever it is, and you can just say, Max, just send me all the crap that you've done and I'll tell you off later. So to find those partners and stakeholders in the business that can kind of ride with your level of chaos that you're sort of wading through, and it's about building all those cornerstones up, and trying to take as much as possible yourself. The hiring,
the firing,
I mean, it's all experience that I'd had in the past, which lent itself well and to me. And had I not had this level of experience, I think I definitely would have failed in setting up this business, because actually there was a lot more complex infrastructure and engineering involved in the water systems, the sauna systems, and taking up an old Victorian space in the middle of Shoreditch, with all these other challenges that we ended up having like planning permission issues and air conditioning and whatnot, building up in a residential area, dealing with neighbours, dealing with plumbers. So, and then obviously my background in delivering projects in Dubai gave me the skill set to project manage myself the whole build out and fit out, and be comfortable with 6 months of chaos on a building site. And when you're doing this, you need to be prepared to put every single ounce of blood, sweat and tears into it, to the tune of taking a big risk on even starting with the site. You sign on a contract, you've got this business idea, right? And then you rent out this space, and then the terms are, 5 years of renting out this space. That's what you have to commit to. So you can't just say, I'm going to rent out this space, I'm going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars fitting it out, and it will suck if we all fail in the first year, but at least it's like, whatever, that's it, I'm done. No, you've got a 5-year commitment contract on paying £100,000 a year on renting this space. If you fail in the first year, you've still got to deal with 4 years of that. So it's about taking the gravity of the situation and moving forward with that and just going in at it and doing every single ounce of work you can yourself. I demoed, or I demolished the entire site myself, which took about 3 to 4 days of 6 a.m. till about 9 p.m.
Wow.
And I was fucking exhausted.
Yeah.
I'd literally broken my back. I'd broken I couldn't stand. And I'd literally, because I was a moron, and I thought, okay, I'd gotten a giant hammer from my dad's garage, and I thought this'll break it all up. Yeah. And I sat there. I thought it would take me a day or two. I was there for 4 days, just smashing and drilling and like sawing all of these partitions from this old office fit out, stripping the whole thing down. And I had to do it myself because I didn't have the money. We didn't, Dominic and I only had a certain amount of money that we could allocate towards building this business. And there was only so much that we were prepared to take the risk on and invest in this. So everything else to bridge the gap, I had to do myself. And it really is blood, sweat and tears. The amount of blood I lost through almost hacking my finger off, and things like that. And that's what commitment is to starting up a business. And, some people may say, well, it's not grassroots because you invested a lot of money from the start. You had loads of money in, but I mean, even though we have no choice, right? You need a lot of money to just put a deposit down for renting a venue in London, and everything else you have to do yourself. It kills you. And it was a while. I grew very complacent because I had 8 years in Dubai, having a team of 40 to 50 people around me, beginning to allocate all of the roles and positions across, so I had to do work, but I didn't have to do that kind of work. So I really had to step in the old boots. This is like literally going to the back of my closet and putting those old boots on again and really grinding through.
Yeah, because what's really interesting about the ideation element, or just the general element of this business called Sauna and Plunge, is that one of the biggest misconceptions is that a business idea is this one eureka moment. Yeah. That you're sitting in a bathtub or you're looking at something, you go, oh my God, I've got it. I'm going to build Facebook now. Yeah, and it's just like, no. You might have one semi-formed sort of half thought. Yeah. Yeah. Of like, I really like plunges and saunas. Yeah. And to turn that into a business is that, as you said before, that cultivated approach, but it's that layered approach of, before you even get to the UK and allocating costings and budget and all that stuff, it's, okay, well, is there a market for this kind of stuff? Yeah. And you can do all the research in the world, but you've got to, as you say, you have that gut feeling that this will work. Yeah. And I think a lot of people have that entrepreneurial gut where you just got to make a call, and you either take that calculated risk or you don't. Yeah. So you've got that element to it. Then you've got, of course, the logistical element. How does it even work? How many saunas you're going to build? How many plunges you're going to build? What you're going to charge? How we're going to set out, as you say, the branding, the structure. How we could get money over from Dubai into the UK to actually pay for things. How are we going to hire our first few people to get things going? What company structure are we going to use? Are we going to set up a company? All those little things layer into the business idea because they form part of the foundational element of it. It's also
something that has to happen kind of in a chronological order as well. You can't just, the worst thing you can do is sit in a room and say, here are all the things I need to do. Tackle it all at the same time. One thing leads to another. You almost have to eliminate one hurdle before getting to the next one.
What I really want people who have maybe they struggle to come up with a business idea is to not potentially over focus on the idea itself, but come up with something that has some legs, and those legs will, as you say, the feasibility, just a simple understanding of how you're going to make money, the simple understanding of who your customers are, what's your ideal client, and just fleshing that and articulating it. And once you kind of genuinely and authentically thought about a business idea, sometimes you've got to just say at some point, "Do you know what? I've done enough. I just need to get on with it."
Well, this is one thing that I tell everyone who, you know, now that I'm investing in other businesses, or whoever will ask me, you know, you could spend 6 months to a year developing the perfect business plan. The moment you incorporate that business and sit down at your brand new desk with your new computer and you get cracking, that business plan literally goes out the window.
Oh yeah.
Because you literally never refer back to it again, because what happens in real life is very different to what happens to someone who's, you know, naive and doesn't understand how business works and happens on a theoretical piece of paper. So do not procrastinate over a business plan, and don't get held up over it. Absolutely develop a business plan, unless you're really trying to go for a big fundraise and things like that where it needs to be really solid. Then fine. If you're just doing the business plan for the sake of doing a business plan, getting some investment, bringing some people on board, but also developing your own idea so you know how to go into with what goals and incentives, absolutely very important, but don't dwell on it. Just get it done. I think what you were touching on, what's been really critical for me is, you know, you can sit there and you can spend days coming up with a really nice brand and, you know, developing your own website yourself, like I've had to do because we've bootstrapped everything, and, you know, creating this beautiful theoretical business that isn't actually operational yet. Think about all the time and effort you've already spent into it, put time into, and it's still not actually incorporated yet. So put that on ice a little bit and start working on the things that are tangible, right? And building out a financial model, I think, is probably the key and most critical aspect, especially when it comes to winning investment, right? You can download a Excel financial model, maybe not a very good one, from the internet, or you can, you know, call Rohit and ask you for a financial model, and you could probably give them a generic one, and all they need to do is plug in all of their own expenses, all their, you know, their costs, overheads, and all the target, you know, all the revenue projections, and any other algorithms that need to be sorted in. You know, how I was able to build out that financial model was going around and going to other spas and other businesses that were not quite the same as Sauna and Plunge, but that I knew I'd be competing with in some respect, also gyms and things like that. And kind of sort of cobbling together a median set of monthly revenue targets that I think were feasible and that aligned with the figures that I was being told when I went there. Like, hey, you know, how many members do you guys have? And, you know, how many members do you sign up a month? And how many visitors do you have? And, you know, if you have X amount of visitors a day and they pay either this or that, you know, it's very easy to break down a financial model of another business if you go there and ask the right questions, and maybe not show that you're, you know, going to be competing with them in a few months' time.
Yeah, I think I really like that, because a lot of people get scared of the numbers, and I think it's one of those things where what was, maybe let's do a little summary, because what we're saying is do enough of a business plan that gets you going. You've got some ideas, you've done the ideation, you've built it, you've fleshed it out, but there will come a crunch point where you've just got to say, look, let's just do it. And a huge part of that thinking is some kind of financials at the model.
Yeah.
Only by my model, it's literally just cracking open an Excel spreadsheet, as you say, download a generic template, but you can do it on a monthly basis, start from Jan, December, do 2 years worth, because that's, beyond that, it's just too theoretical.
Yeah.
And then always start from the top, so revenue. And as you said, if you don't know any variable within your model, go and find out. So if it's a membership basis, how do you know how many members are going to sign up front? Well, you don't. So go and find out what other spas have.
Exactly.
Find out how many they sign up per month. Cut that down because they're probably well established.
Yeah.
And then you've got the number of members. Then you've got your pricing. Again, look at all the pricing in your area. If you're a more premium product, price your product more appropriately. If you're not as premium, less than.
God, you're so good at breaking it down. Right?
Well, it's one of those things where it sounds scary because it's like financial modelling. And when I first started, I was like,
but the principles of it are so simple. It's Lego, it's Jenga bricks.
Literally, and it's go from the top line, go from that revenue, just break it down. Then you've got your costings. You don't have to worry about gross profit, and it's fancy shit. Just do whatever you think is going to cost within your business. So most of the time you're going to have people. Sometimes you have an office or some kind of lease for your place. Chuck that in there. And then you've got boring shit like marketing, branding, stationery, accountants, lawyers, all that stuff. Just put in a little budget for everything. And then you'll find out that's your monthly cash flow or monthly profit, if you've got profit. And if you haven't got profit, it's either your pricing is wrong or you've got too many expenses. And then
you won't have profit until later on as well, right? Like
exactly. If there's upfront costs that you need to spend, do that thinking, because once you go down each line, you realise, okay, marketing and branding, you probably spend quite a bit up front because you've got the website, you've got the logo design. You're not going to design a logo every month.
No,
so just using a bit of common sense. Something like a lease, for example, you might pay quarterly or monthly rather than annually. So obviously you factor that in.
And negotiate the best terms as well. For example, even a quarterly lease, you might be able to negotiate that into monthly costs, which will actually make a big difference for your business. And it certainly is for Sauna and Plunge.
Absolutely.
That's
and once you've got, if you don't know something, go and find it out. Go and Google it. Go and maybe put a notional number in and start thinking about who your competitors are and talking to them. And as you say, you can even experience their products or services.
Yeah.
And once you've got the numbers and you look back and go like, right, okay, my revenue looks like this. Does that sound crazy? Yes or no? Give it to someone. Give it to me. Give it to you. And go like, well, this seems crazy because the assumptions are crazy. Or this seems about right because, okay, you've made reasonable assumptions. Or maybe it's too conservative. But just getting something down so that you have something to work with is so much better than just being too theoretical.
Absolutely.
And once you've got to that stage, then you can say, okay, year one, maybe I'm not in a profit, but that's okay because I'm going to fund it, and that's how I'm going to fund it.
Yeah.
And then year two, maybe there's a break-even point. Maybe there's a point where maybe you can start to even think about profits and dare say beyond. And then you've got a plan. Now you've got something to sit with. Now you've got a level of potential enthusiasm because at the end of it, you go, oh, I can make this much money. This is quite interesting.
Exactly. You can see that business model sort of taking fruition, right? And that's what I would agree with the most. Like, put it down, get it down on paper, put it on an Excel sheet, get it down, because if it's not down on paper, it doesn't exist, and it's just theory, and you'll never do it. You'll never jump into it if you don't take the time to just put the theory and put it on paper and lay it all out in front of you.
I completely agree.
That is the stage. That's the stage where the idea begins to take shape. And it's up to you whether you pull the trigger or not. But you won't even be in that position if you don't put it down, because nothing can happen. You can't just throw out investment on a whim. It has to go down on paper. And quantifying it all gives you so much perspective about the risk that you're about to take on, whether it's large or whether it's manageable.
Max, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Really appreciate your time. We have a small tradition on this show.
Yeah.
Where we ask every guest a final question. And you've had a bit of time to prepare for it, just for full disclosure.
Yes.
So our final question is, if your 18-year-old self was speaking to your 80-year-old self, what kind of conversation do you think they would have?
Good. Well, given the day or two that I had to prepare for this, I was cycling around the other day and I thought of something that really resonated. And this is something that Dominic and I both discussed when we were literally starting out with Generation 3D. My 80-year-old self would, and it's hard to anticipate that because I'm not 80, but I think one thing that really resonates with me now is the fact that, you know, when you're talking about entrepreneurship, it's all about taking risks, right? And just going for it. It has to be done on a gut instinct, and you have to just pull the trigger, regardless of how calculated it is or not. When you're talking to an 18-year-old, they're 18 years old. Chances are they won't have any assets. They won't have any mortgages. They may or may not have a girlfriend. If they do, it's most likely not going to be a marriage. They won't have any pets, any children. Maybe they will, but of course, you know, this is the likelihood. And their bank account balance is probably going to be fairly minimal. In essence, you have nothing to lose. You can risk it all, find a bit of investment, crack on, take that risk. If it all goes well, great. If it doesn't, you circle back, and where are you? You're straight back to where you started. And it can all happen within the space of 1 year, and then you'll be 19 years old. The point being that when you're young and nimble and agile and plucky, and you have youth and energy and naivety on your side, take the risk. If you feel good about something, commit to it. If you have an idea and if you feel that passionately about it, do the due diligence, you know, prepare for it, but don't procrastinate. Go for it.
Certainly if I was 18, even sitting as at my age now, I would say to my 18-year-old self, let alone when I'm 80, when I've hopefully got a bit of wisdom under my under my belt, and the way that you'd have that conversation. But thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it, Max Reynard.
No problem. Thank you.
Always
very
a pleasure.
Much. Right, man. Cheers. I appreciate
cheers.
that.
Take care.
Cheers.